Imagine waking up in June, getting ready for a nice summer stroll, and being greeted by a casual blizzard. Welcome to 1816, a year so thoroughly broken that history literally labeled it the year without a summer. It was a vibe check of global proportions, all thanks to a massive volcanic eruption in Indonesia called Mount Tambora, which decided to hit the delete button on the global climate. Tambora blew its top with the chaotic energy of 1,000 atomic bombs, yeeting millions of tons of ash into the atmosphere and effectively putting the entire planet in a permanent dark mode. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was the ultimate ruined summer plans meme brought to life. People in New England were trying to harvest crops in July while dodging actual snowbanks, probably wondering if they had somehow accidentally offended the gods or if the universe was just trolling them. Meanwhile, in Europe, the weather was giving pure apocalyptic energy. It rained so relentlessly that a group of writers locked themselves inside a Swiss villa, got bored, and Mary Shelley casually wrote Frankenstein just to pass the time. Talk about turning a dark, depressing winter in July into an absolute win. If social media existed back then, the internet would have had an absolute field day with this climate apocalypse. You can already picture the Reddit threads filled with users crying about their failed potato crops, while the boomers of the 19th century insisted that a little frost in August builds character. X would be flooded with "me looking for the sun" in mid-July, memes featuring paintings of confused peasants staring at a pitch-black sky. On Instagram, influencers would be struggling to find that perfect golden hour lighting, forced to post heavily filtered, gloomy aesthetic shots with captions like "just 1,816 things." Over on TikTok, people would be making transition videos from swimwear to full winter parkas in seconds, set to some melancholic classical remix. The global economy took a massive L as food prices skyrocketed, leading to widespread food riots that gave off major survivalist energy. People were so desperate for transportation because horses were starving that Karl Dreis looked at the chaos and invented the Laufmaschine, the literal ancestor of the bicycle. So, yes, the next time your summer vacation gets ruined by a little rain, just remember that in 1816, the world collectively experienced a year-long winter, survived on birdseed, and somehow got a legendary monster and bicycles out of the deal. To truly understand how we got here, we have to look at the main culprit of this global disaster, which wasn't even on the radar of anyone living in Europe or America at the time. Enter Mount Tambora, located on the island of Sumbawa in modern-day Indonesia. In April 1815, this absolute unit of a volcano decided it was done being quiet and unleashed the largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history. It was a VEI 7 event, which is basically the geological equivalent of the volcano saying, "Watch this." The explosion was so violently loud that British soldiers hundreds of miles away in Java thought they were hearing distant cannon fire and scrambled to find an invading army. Tambora didn't just leak a little lava. It blasted roughly 140 billion tons of magma, ash, and toxic gas straight into the stratosphere. The mountain literally lost a third of its height overnight, transforming from a towering peak into a massive, hollowed-out crater. This titanic cloud of sulfur dioxide and ash didn't just stay in Indonesia. It hitched a ride on the jet stream and began a slow, ominous march around the globe like a real-life villain, shadow creeping across a map. By the time 1816 rolled around, this microscopic blanket of volcanic aerosols was hovering over the Northern Hemisphere, acting as a giant cosmic mirror that reflected sunlight right back into space. The planet was effectively trapped under a dusty umbrella, and global temperatures plummeted. For the average person living in London, Paris, or Boston, there was absolutely no context for this. They didn't have satellite imagery or global news networks to tell them a mountain had exploded on the other side of the world. As far as they knew, the sun was just losing its power. The atmosphere was turning a bizarre, sickly yellow, and the apocalypse had finally arrived on their doorstep ahead of schedule. When spring finally rolled around in 1816, people were expecting the usual blooming flowers and warmer days, but the weather had other plans and decided to double down on the chaos. In May, a brutal frost swept through the northeastern United States, killing off the newly planted crops and leaving farmers completely bewildered. But June was when things went from slightly weird to utterly surreal. On June 6th, a massive snowstorm dumped several inches of snow across New England, Canada, and parts of New York. Imagine the sheer confusion of people walking outside in their summer clothes only to find themselves knee-deep in a winter wonderland during the first week of June. People were literally wearing heavy winter coats to tend to their frozen fields, while birds were falling out of the trees, frozen solid mid-flight. It was an absolute logistical nightmare that turned daily life into a grueling survival game. The situation in Canada and the American Northeast quickly shifted from a bizarre weather anomaly to a full-blown existential crisis. Farmers tried to replant their crops multiple times, only for subsequent frosts in July and August to freeze the soil solid all over again. Corn crops, which were the literal lifeblood of the economy and the primary food source for livestock, were completely wiped out. The price of grain skyrocketed to astronomical levels, making basic bread a luxury item that only the ultra-wealthy could afford. This led to a mass migration event, often referred to as Ohio Fever, where thousands of desperate families packed up their few remaining belongings into covered wagons and abandoned New England altogether, fleeing westward in search of warmer weather and soil that wasn't actively trying to kill them. It was a massive, desperate gamble that permanently altered the demographic landscape of America. Across the Atlantic, Europe was having an equally disastrous time, though instead of snow, their flavor of apocalypse came in the form of endless, torrential rain and impenetrable fog. The summer of 1816 was the coldest and wettest on record for Europe, with major rivers like the Rhine and the Rhone overflowing their banks and flooding entire valleys. The lack of sunlight meant that grapes rotted on the vines, wheat turned to mold in the fields, and the entire agricultural sector completely collapsed. In Ireland, the situation was particularly dire, as the cool, damp conditions caused the potato crop to fail, triggering a precursor to the Great Famine that would strike decades later. To make matters worse, a devastating epidemic of typhus tore through the malnourished and weakened population, claiming tens of thousands of lives across the continent. With food supply chains completely shattered, Europe quickly descended into a chaotic mess of civil unrest and desperation. Food riots erupted in major cities across France, Germany, and Great Britain, as starving citizens raided bakeries, intercepted grain shipments, and clashed violently with local militias. It was a period of intense social paranoia, where governments feared that the widespread hunger would spark a wave of political revolutions similar to what France had experienced just a few decades prior. People were reduced to eating anything they could find, including weeds, horses, and even boiling nettles to make a sad, desperate soup. The continent was essentially locked in a collective state of misery, trapped under a permanent gray sky that refused to let a single ray of warm sunshine through for months on end. Yet, amidst all this gloom, despair, and existential dread, humanity's sheer boredom and desperation managed to spark some incredible moments of cultural and technological genius. During that fateful, rainy summer, a group of famous English writers, including Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and an 18-year-old Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, decided to vacation at the Villa Diodati near Lake Geneva in Switzerland. They expected a lovely, sun-drenched holiday, but instead, they found themselves completely trapped indoors by the ceaseless, violent storms. To pass the time and combat the absolute madness of being stuck inside with each other, Lord Byron proposed a contest to see who could write the most terrifying ghost story. Mary took the challenge to heart, channeling the gloomy, apocalyptic atmosphere outside her window, and ended up penning the masterpiece Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. In the exact same villa, during that exact same storm, Byron's physician, John Polidori, wrote The Vampire, which laid the groundwork for the modern aristocratic vampire trope we know today. Meanwhile, the climate crisis was also forcing people to get creative with technology out of pure necessity. Because the crop failures meant there was virtually no oats or grain to feed horses, the primary mode of transportation at the time became too expensive to maintain, and horses were unfortunately being slaughtered for food rather than used for labor. Seeing this massive transport crisis, a German inventor named Karl Dreis decided to find a way to get around without relying on horsepower. In 1817, he unveiled the Laufmaschine, or running machine, a two-wheeled wooden vehicle that the rider propelled by pushing their feet against the ground. This quirky, desperate invention was the direct, undeniable ancestor of the modern bicycle. It is a wild testament to human resilience that a volcanic eruption in Indonesia directly led to the creation of sci-fi horror literature and the concept of cycling to work. As the years rolled on, the heavy volcanic ash and sulfur particles slowly settled back down to Earth, and the global climate gradually stabilized, allowing regular summers to finally return. But the scars of 1816 remained deeply embedded in the collective memory of the world, serving as a harsh reminder of just how fragile human civilization truly is when faced with the raw, unpredictable power of the planet. Today, Mount Tambora stands as a quiet, massive caldera, a beautiful but haunting monument to the time a single mountain successfully put the entire world on pause. It showed us that no matter how advanced, political, or complicated our societies think they are, a bad day for a volcano on one side of the Earth can easily turn into a freezing, chaotic, and completely unforgettable year for everyone else on the other side.